two neighbors. Two different answers. Picture two neighbors in the same apartment complex in an area with no time limit waiver in effect. Both people are hypothetical. The first is 62 years old and receives SS1. The second is 58, able to work, has no personal exception, is not already fulfilling the work standard, and is not covered by a waiver or a discretionary exemption. Given those facts, only one of them must meet the separate SNAP time limit standard, usually 80 hours a month through work or qualifying activities, or the workfare hours assigned to that household, in order to keep food benefits beyond 3 months. It is not the older one, and the reason has very little to do with being 62. SNAP has two separate work rule systems. Here is the structural point that makes the rest of this make sense. SNAP does not have one work requirement. It has two, written into different parts of federal law, with different age ranges, different exemption lists, and different consequences. There are the general work requirements, and there is the separate time limit for adults without dependents. A person can be outside one system and fully inside the other. That single fact explains most of the confusion families run into. Because you're exempt from a caseworker may be a completely accurate statement about one system and say nothing about the other, the general work requirements and the age 60 ceiling. The first system covers people who are physically and mentally fit, from age 16 through age 59. The statute sets that ceiling plainly. It reaches an individual over the age of 15 and under the age of 60, under 60. On the 60th birthday, a person leaves this system by age alone. What does this system ask? Register for work at application and every 12 months after. Take part in SNAP employment and training or workfare if the state assigns it. Accept a suitable job if one is offered. Don't quit a job or reduce hours below 30 a week without good reason. A person under 60 is still excused from these rules if they are already working at least 30 hours a week, or earning weekly wages equal to 30 hours at the federal minimum wage. If they are subject to and complying with work requirements under TANF, or the federal state unemployment compensation system if they are caring for a dependent child under 6 or an incapacitated person. If they are unable to work due to a physical or mental limitation. If they participate regularly in a drug or alcohol treatment and rehabilitation program. Or if they are a bona fide student enrolled at least half-time in a recognized school, training program, or institution of higher education. For this system, and only this system, 60 really is the finish line, the separate time limit, the work standard, and ages 18. Through 64, the second system is the time limit, and turning 60 does not end it. If it applies, a person can receive SNAP for only 3 countable months out of every 36 unless they meet the work standard. The most common way to meet it is 20 hours per week averaged monthly, which the regulation defines directly as 80 hours a month. Those 80 hours do not have to come from a paycheck. The rules count work in exchange for money. Work in exchange for goods or services, what the regulation calls in-kind work, unpaid work, verified under state standards, participation in an approved work program such as SNAP employment and training, or any combination of those adding to 80. Combining sources is allowed, and for many people it is the realistic path. Workfare is the exception to the 80-hour figure, and this distinction is worth holding on to. Workfare hours are not 80 by default. Federal law caps the required hours at the household's monthly allotment, divided by the higher of the federal or state minimum wage. A smaller benefit means fewer assigned hours. So for someone in workfare, meeting the standard means completing the hours the state actually assigns, which may be well under 80. Now the age range, and this is what changed. Before the 2025 law, the time limit reached ages 18 through 54. That 54 was itself recent. The Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023 had already raised the ceiling in stages, from 49 to 50, then 52, then 54 by October 2024. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act of 2025, Public Law 119-21, Section 10102, raised it again from 54 to 64. That is a 10-year expansion on top of the earlier increases. Federal implementation materials and state agencies administer the range as ages 18 through 64, with age 65 and older exempt. North Carolina, Arkansas, and the District of Columbia all state it the same way on their official pages. So if you are 65 or older, this system does not apply to you. If you are 55 to 64, you are in an age range that was outside this system 2 years ago and is inside it now. The 2025 law also narrowed several exceptions. The dependent child exception now requires a child under 14 in the household. Exceptions that had covered veterans, people experiencing homelessness, and former foster youth up to 24 were eliminated. New exceptions were added for Indians, urban Indians, and certain California Indians, as those terms are defined in federal Indian health law. Exceptions, waivers, and the screening your state owes you. 3 separate protections can keep the clock from running, and they work differently. First, personal exceptions. Beyond age, the time limit does not apply to someone medically certified as physically or mentally unfit for employment, someone pregnant, someone responsible for a dependent child under 14, someone otherwise exempt from the general work requirements, or someone within the Native American exceptions. Second, geographic waivers. A state can ask USDA to waive the time limit for a group of individuals in an area. Under the 2025 law, the long-standing insufficient jobs basis was eliminated. An area now qualifies where the unemployment rate is over 10%, or in a non-contiguous state, where unemployment is at or above 1.5 times the national rate, the provision that matters for Alaska and Hawaii. If you live in a waived area, months do not count against you, even though your age places you in the covered range. Third, discretionary exemptions. Each state receives an allotment of individual exemptions it can apply case by case, currently calculated at 8% of covered individuals, with unused exemptions carried forward. 2 practical points about waivers. A waiver of the time limit does not waive the general work requirements. Someone under 60 can live in a waived area and still owe work registration and E&T participation. And when a waiver ends, the clock does not start mid-month. Countable months begin with the first full benefit month afterward. There is also a duty on the agency side that many people never hear about. The regulation requires the state to screen for every exception at certification and at recertification. It further provides that the state must not assign countable months unless it has screened the individual and determined that no exception applies. That duty continues between those points. If your circumstances change mid-certification and you newly qualify for an exception, the state must act promptly to verify it and cannot keep counting months against you. And when exception status looks questionable, the state must first try to verify through information it already has, including data shared from other public assistance programs, before asking you to produce documents. Why age 60 helps your SNAP math but not your SNAP clock. Here is where the vocabulary trips people, and it is worth slowing down for. In SNAP, a person is elderly at 60. That category is real and valuable, but it governs how your benefit is calculated, not whether the time limit applies. Turning 60 or having a disabled household member changes the arithmetic in 4 ways. Your household is tested on net income rather than having to pass both a gross and a net test. The federal countable resource limit rises from $3,000 to $4,500, though many states use broad-based categorical eligibility that raises or eliminates that test entirely. So your state's rule may be more generous. You can deduct out-of-pocket medical expenses above $35 a month, and your excess shelter deduction is not capped the way it is for other households for everyone else. It stops at $744 for fiscal year 2026. For scale, in fiscal year 2026, a one-person household faces a net income limit of $1,305 a month, with a maximum allotment of $298. None of that is a work exemption. The exception list for the time limit is a different list in a different section of law, and age 60 is not on it. Age 60 improves your SNAP math. Age 65 ends your SNAP work clock. Those 5 years in between are where people are surprised. Why SSI protects the 62-year-old now, the payoff for our first neighbor. The protection is not the birthday. Social Security's age-based SSI category begins at 65. SSA states it directly. Citizens 65 or older don't need to have a disability to get SS1. Someone receiving SSY at 62, therefore qualified through disability or blindness, because at that age, no other door exists. That matters because of how SNAP defines its own exception. These are two different statutes with different wording, so the connection runs through the SNAP regulation, not through matching language. The SNAP rule says, a person is medically certified as physically or mentally unfit for employment if they are receiving temporary or permanent disability benefits issued by governmental or private sources. SSI received on a disability or blindness basis is exactly that kind of governmental disability benefit, so the SSI award supplies the factual basis for a SNAP exception that stands on its own, independent of age. Change one fact and the answer changes. A 62-year-old with no disability determination. Someone who retired early, living on a small pension or on very little, is outside the general work requirements but inside the time limit unless another exception or a waiver applies. Why the 58-year-old in this example faces both. Our second neighbor is 58, which is under 60, so the general work requirements apply. 58 also falls inside 18 through 64. But age alone doesn't produce that result. Getting to both systems apply required every one of these facts. She is physically and mentally able to work. She has no dependent child under 14 in the household. She is not pregnant. She is not caring for an incapacitated person. She is not a regular participant in a qualifying drug or alcohol treatment program. She is not enrolled at least half-time in a recognized school or training program. She is not subject to and complying with TANF work requirements. She is neither receiving unemployment compensation nor complying with its application-related work requirements. She is not working 30 hours a week and not earning weekly wages equal to 30 hours at the federal minimum wage. She has no other personal exception. She is not already fulfilling the time limit work or workfare standard. She does not live in an area covered by a waiver. And she has not received a state discretionary exemption. That is a long list, and the length is the point. Many 58-year-olds may qualify for another exception. So age and the absence of a young child do not settle the question by themselves. What being under 60 does mean is that no age protection exists in either system, so everything turns on the specific exceptions. Two changes deserve attention here. Households raising a 14, 15, or 16-year-old may have been exempt under the old dependent rule and may not be now, and veterans, people experiencing homelessness, and former foster youth up to 24 lost exceptions they previously held. Guidance exists. The consumer page simply hasn't caught up. One caution about what you'll find online, offered calmly, because this is a documentation problem rather than anything hidden. Federal implementation guidance does exist. USDA issued an ABAWD exceptions implementation memorandum in October 2025 covering Section 10102. A companion memorandum on waivers, and additional time limit changes questions and answers published June 11, 2026. What has not caught up is the plain language consumer page describing work requirements. It still shows the pre-2025 range of 18 to 54 and still lists veterans, people experiencing homelessness, and former foster youth as excused. The underlying regulation text carries similar older language because rule updates follow statutes rather than arriving with them. The amended statute controls. USDA's implementation memoranda explain how state agencies are expected to apply the changes. The consumer summary has not been reconciled with either one, so it should not be used to settle a question about your own case. Which brings us to the notice in your mailbox. What a state notice actually tells you. A notice from your state agency is not a higher authority than federal law. What it does is show you how your state has coded your case. Whether you have been classified as subject to the time limit, when countable months may begin, what verification is being requested, and what deadline applies. That is exactly the information you need, and you can't get it from any website. If the notice reflects an error, a missed exception, a waiver not applied, a disability benefit not recorded, you can challenge it through the fair hearing process, generally with up to 90 days from the action to request a hearing. Use those days early rather than late. 5 things worth doing. Contact your state. Snap Office through the official state directory and ask one precise question. Am I coded as subject to the time limit? And if so, which month is month 1? That question produces a usable answer. Am I exempt? Often does not. If you have a health condition that limits your ability to work and you are between 18 and 64, ask what medical verification your state accepts. A statement from a physician, nurse practitioner, physician assistant, psychologist, social worker, or other approved medical personnel can establish the medical exception. If you already receive SSY or SSDY, confirm your file reflects it. That is the protection our 62-year-old relies on, and it works only if the agency has the information. Ask whether your county is covered by a waiver and whether your state has applied a discretionary exemption to your case. Both can stop months from counting. If a decision looks wrong, request a fair hearing in writing. And if you're helping a parent in another state, call the Elder Care Locator at 1-800-67-71116, a public service of the Administration for Community Living, to reach the Area Agency on Aging in their county for local benefits counseling. What to carry away 60 is the age that improves your SNAP math. 65 is the age that ends your SNAP work clock. In between, the answer depends on exceptions, waivers, and how your case is coded, not on your birthday. And for anyone receiving SSM before 65, the protection comes from the disability determination underneath the award, not from the age itself. Knowing which one protects you is what lets you notice if it ever changes. I'm not a lawyer or a benefits counselor, and this is general information rather than advice about your case. It's the rules, sourced, so you can ask your own office a sharper question. If you're between 55 and 65 and received a work requirement notice this year, tell me in the comments what your state said. Please keep it general, no case numbers, addresses, dates of birth, or other personal details, since comments are public. The patterns in those comments guide what I research next.